Hello and welcome everybody, especially to our Vietnamese audience. Today we have David van Vooren from David Hirson Partners, one of the more reputable immigration firms in the USA, and we will be making them some questions regarding the EB-5 program to inform our Vietnamese audience. Hi David, nice to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. Thank you to Buy Capital for the opportunity to be here.
For Vietnamese investors interested to do EB-5, what are the key factors they should consider before choosing doing EB-5 or choosing a project?
Sure. So basically, going to be two parts of the EB-5 case to have a successful case. Number one, choosing a reliable project that leads to job creation. That is the first requirement. Depends on the project that you invest in. So very important to do due diligence on the project. Make sure that usually construction moves forward, and that's how you get the jobs. And then number two is the EB-5 investor's lawful source of funds. That is the main and really only requirement to be eligible for EB-5. If you can show that your money comes from a lawful source, that $800,000 investment, you should have a successful and approved EB-5 case.
So if investors have the fund and they are able to prove the source of those funds, it's pretty easy process. They don't need to speak English, they don't need to have a sponsor, they don't need any additional requirement. Only having the funds and be able to prove.
Yes, that's exactly right. If the EB-5 investor can show how they earn that money and we can document it through evidence, documents going back in time, they should have a successful EB-5 case.
That sounds great. Vietnam has faced EB-5 visa backlog in the past. I think 2016, 17, 18, but now there is not backlog. Do you envision any future backlog in the short term?
Yeah, so several years ago, EB-5 investors, China, India, and Vietnam all were faced with backlogs. And it basically prolonged the immigration process quite a bit and was very unfortunate. But with the new passage of the 2022 law called the Reform Integrity Act, or RIA, that created new visa, we'll call set-asides available, no backlog at the moment. And so far, based on the most recent statistics we have, only about 200 Vietnamese investors have filed cases since 2022. That's a pretty low number. Because of that, we do not anticipate backlogs for Vietnamese investors at the moment.
Great. So in the short term, unless something crazy happens in the next few months, there is not any backlog on the panorama, I would say. Recently, there have been talk about new investment immigration visa called Trump Gold Card. How do you see that? There is any possibility that visa to become true and to challenge the EB-5 program in the short term?
Yes. So the Trump Gold Card was announced, I believe, a few months ago now. But we're still waiting for the details. And honestly, I'm skeptical that the program will ever come into fruition. Essentially, if the gold card ever did come into existence, you would almost certainly need Congress to pass some type of law to make it an actual immigration program. So far, no details have come out, and there's been no legislation presented in Congress.
So in the short time, for investment in immigration investor, the best option still the EB-5 program.
Yeah, absolutely. EB-5 is available. The RIA has created, new visas available. The program has become, I think, approved in a lot of aspects. So for investment-based visa, EB-5 is the best option.
Since the passing of the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act 2022, what are the additional compliance that the new law have added to the regional center, to the NCs, to the JCs? Can you elaborate a little bit more about that, how the new law is making the program more safest for investors?
Yes, with the RIA, much more oversight from the government on the program, much more basically required transparency that all EB-5 projects are allowed to follow. And basically each year, EB-5 projects have to report exactly how much EB-5 money they've raised, how much EB-5 money they spent, and also have very specific ongoing job creation numbers for the project.
Okay, so the additional compliance we have with the new law is guaranteed. It's not, we cannot say guarantee, but it's helping to have better players in the market, I would say.
Yes, absolutely. EB-5 investors should have access to a lot of this information. How their money is spent, how the jobs are being created, what's the progress of the project. Basically, they should be getting much more transparency into those kind of aspects of the project. In the past, it was sometimes a lot of the investors hard for them to get information until maybe they get to the end of the process. The I-29, which is the last step of the EB-5 process, for a lot of investors, not really clear what was the status of the project.
Many Vietnamese investors want to know what is the minimum time their investment have to be applied in the EB-5 project, how fast they can recover their money legally. Can you explain a little bit more about the new sustainment period according to the Reform and Integrity Act?
Yes, so prior to the RIA, EB-5 investors essentially had to keep their money invested in the project until they got to the end of the immigration process, got their permanent green cards, which due to backlogs ended up taking many, many years. And there's still investors today who invested a long time ago. Their money is still invested and sustained in the project. So big improvement with RIA, clearly defined 2-year minimum investment term for the funds. If the funds have been invested for 2 years and the jobs have been created, they can get their money back, and it's no longer tied to when they get to the end of the immigration process.
Those are very good news, David, because then you can avoid completely the redeployment problem you had before. No? Many clients, because they didn't have the approval of the I-829, they have to redeploy the fund many times for a long time.
Exactly. And in my opinion, quite unfair to the investors, requiring them to have their money tied up in the project for that long and then potentially redeployed to new projects. You never know what could happen. Even things could look safe. There's always a certain level of risk there. So, of course, the sooner you're able to get your money back, of course, that's going to be safer.
One of the issues with EB-5 program is always how fast they are going to process my case. No? 2 questions. How fast in EB-5 submission are processed right now? And what can Vietnamese investors do to speed up the answer or resolution from their cases? Sure.
So right now we're estimating for the first step of the EB-5 process, the I-526E petition, estimating about 1 to 2 year processing time for that step. But if things drag on, especially if your case has been pending for more than a year, we can look at what's called a writ of mandamus. Writ of mandamus is essentially a lawsuit against USAS requiring them to take action on the case. And within RIA, there's a lot of language about how cases need to be processed within a certain amount of time. With that, we're very confident that once your case has been pending for some time and you want to speed up the process, get it approved, file a mandamus, get that case basically pushed forward towards approval. And in most cases, once we file the mandamus, the case should get a positive result in 1 to 2 months. So always a sensitive issue, processing times, how long are things going to take? After some time, it just becomes kind of, how long do I really have to wait here? To basically take control over the situation, you can file a writ of mandamus. In most cases, it will speed up the process quite considerably. David, can you tell us a little bit more about the grandfathering process and why it is important for investors that are interested in EB-5 to do it before 30th of September 2026, that the grandfathering expires? Yes, so with the authorization of the EB-5 program under RIA, that was a 5-year extension of the program, and that goes until September of 2027. So the program is valid until that date. But within the RIA, there is something called the grandfathering provision stating as long as an EB-5 investor files their case before September of 2026, they're grandfathered in, they are protected from any other future changes to the program. Okay, so investors submitting the EB-5 petition before 30th of September 2026 are protected by the grandfathering provision that their case is going to be finalized, it's going to be complete. Exactly. So if the rules change in the future, that will not impact investors who've already filed their cases. Their cases should progress as planned and without any kind of disruption. To wrap up, to finalize, David, what advice you will give to Vietnamese investors thinking about EB-5 like a path to live, work, and build a life in the United States? Sure. I would say, of course, EB-5, big decision, not a small amount of money, big decision for the whole family. But if you want to do EB-5, almost certainly better to do it now rather than later. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. The law only goes until 2027. What happens after that, we don't know. So if you want to do EB-5, the program has been working very well under RIA. I would say make your investment sooner rather than later. And that way you take control, you can kind of anticipate the next steps and hopefully have a successful case. Really the only main requirement, eligibility requirement for the investor is that lawful source of funds. So encourage you to work with an experienced EB-5 attorney, a lot of experience with source of funds, a lot of kind of interaction with the government to understand what gets approved, what can potentially be a problem. Only with that kind of experience on the EB-5 lawyer side will you be able to avoid those types of problems. Thank you very much, David. It was a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you very much for having me today, Buy Capital and Ivan. It's been my pleasure. If you do have any specific questions about your case, would be happy to consult with you one-on-one. Feel free to contact me through Buy Capital.